Hey everybody, this is Nick. I'm going to give you a quick version of the tutorial we just did in class today. This is the Unity editor. On our left here, we have if your version of Unity doesn't look basically like this, you can go to Window, Layouts, and then Default, and it will reset everything to the default layout. There's other layouts available as well. You can pick your favorite, but default's fine. So up here is our scene view. This is the 3D environment that we're working in. On the left is a hierarchy, which shows us the scene, which is untitled, and everything inside of that scene, which right now is just a camera and a light, a directional light, which functions kind of like a sun. You can see if I click on these objects in the hierarchy panel, it shows properties of each of these objects here on the other side. So everything in Unity, everything in a scene in Unity is a game object with components attached to it. So a light is a game object with a transform and a light attached to it. The main camera is a game object with a transform, a camera, and an audio listener attached to it. The audio listener basically is you attach it to an object to tell Unity that this is where the player's ears are for when it's calculating spatial audio based on where objects are in the scene and so on. So that's how all that works. I can go and change things about these objects here. I could switch this camera from normal, well, let's leave that for later. Down here is the project view, which is where all of the assets of our project live. So right now, all I have in this project is a folder with the sample scene in it and nothing else. So again, a scene is, you could think of it as a level in a video game or a scene in a movie. It's a really useful way to sort of organize your project into distinct levels or scenes. Yeah. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is give us something to move around and play with. So we can add a new game object to our scene under here, game object. I'll pick a cube. There's lots of other options here, including an empty game object. Let's just see what that looks like. You can see there's nothing there. All game objects have a transform, but then what else it does depends on what components you add to it. I'm going to get rid of this empty game object. I'll go game object, 3D object, cube. So Unity gives you some so-called primitive shapes to use for testing purposes and things like that. They're pretty useful. So our cube has a mesh filter, a mesh renderer, a box collider, which is for physics and we don't really care about for now, and a material. And this material is actually sort of a part of the mesh renderer component. So the way that 3D graphics work, this is pretty much all you need to render a scene, to render an object. You have a light, you have a 3D model with some kind of material attached to it, and that material as a part of it has a small program called a shader inside of it, and the shader looks at the light, it looks at where the camera is, and it looks at all these other little details about what the material is in order to sort of assemble, well, it's off the screen right now, I'll move it into the frame, in order to render that. Okay, so the default material is okay, it's kind of boring, it's just a white box. I can create a new material, but in order to do that, I actually have to make a new asset that represents that material. So in order to do that, I can right-click in the project panel and hit Create Material, or I can click this Create button and select Material, or I can go Assets, Create Material. I like to just do it by right-clicking myself. So I'll go right-click, Create Material. You can see now I have this blue dot, which is a new material. You want to name everything something descriptive. So I'll call this box test material. Eventually, when you're working on large projects, you'll have potentially hundreds of different materials in your project. So it's good idea to not just call them material 1, material 2, material 3, because you'll never be able to find them again if you do that. And if your project is of any kind of size at all. So I'll call this box test material. And you can see as soon as I did that, it changed the graphic to a little preview, which is also down here. You can see a preview of what this material looks like. I can change certain features of it. So actually up here, I can pick from a bunch of different shaders. So the standard shader is fine, but just to give you a sense of what shaders are about, if I go to unlit color, it actually just renders the whole object a solid color, and then I could pick a different color for it. So if I added this to my box right now, you suddenly can't see any depth or sense of shadows or anything. This unlit color shader is exactly what it says. It doesn't react to lights at all. It just draws a solid color, which depending on what you want to do might be useful. I worked on a project where I wanted characters in the scene to be perfect silhouettes. So I just used an unlit black material on everything, and it works fine. But most often, we're not going to want to do that. We'll probably be using the standard shader. Okay. So I can change things like the color, make it red, how metallic it is, which sort of affects how reflective it is. You need to add what's called reflection probes to your scene to really make this effect look cool, but it's sort of about that, reflectiveness. And then smoothness, which you can see as I'm sliding it, sort of affects mostly how light interacts with it. So a very smooth, perfectly smooth thing. This looks like it's maybe a blob of liquid or something almost. And this looks like it's maybe made out of a smooth plastic. There's other options here like normal map and height map and occlusion and detail mask. You don't need to worry about most of these, but normal map is useful. Normal map lets you add extra details to the surface that you wouldn't want to have as part of our 3D model in order to save the polygon count. So like I explained in class, the normal is basically a line that's perpendicular to the surface to a plane. So we have an image that will represent that later on. There's also an option which I didn't show you in class, but is pretty cool, called emission, which basically you can cause the object to glow, which is neato. But I don't want that for now. Okay, so I want to import some textures to use on this box. I want to make it look like it's made out of wood. So I've already downloaded these textures to my computer. You can usually find textures online or create your own using Photoshop or just photos or drawings or whatever you like. So I can import these image files, that's all they are, into my project a few different ways. I can go Assets, Import New Asset, or I could find the file in my Explorer, like here's one here, wood.jpg. So I can click and drag this into my project panel just like that, and now it's there in my scene or in my project. Or I can go Asset, Import New Asset, and then I can find the other one of these materials, which is the seamless black fine wood texture, texturized normal, whatever. This is one I found on the internet. So I have my wood texture, which is just kind of the color of wood. And then this weird blue texture, which is actually the normal map. So if I go back to my material, I can either click and drag textures from here into these, like that. You can see it's tinting it kind of red. I'll just leave it, usually want it at least a little bit gray. So there's our wood box. And then I'll add my normal map. So the other way I can add textures here is I can just click on this little dot right next to this field. And then this shows me every texture in my entire project. So I can scale this up and to actually kind of see little thumbnails of it with this slider here. Or I could search up here, seamless black. Or because I don't have that many textures yet, I can just click on it right away. I'll add that. You can see this texture is not marked as a normal map. I'll go ahead and do that. Now I can slide this back and forth to increase basically the amount that this normal map is affecting the surface. So you can see it kind of adds this bumpiness to that surface. And the way this normal map works, it's rendering basically that normal I was talking about, the perpendicular line to the surface. It's representing it as a pixel, red, blue, and green. And blue is just straight out, that's the z-axis. Red is the x-axis, and green is the y-axis. So part of this that's a little bit pink is going slightly to the right. Part of it that's green is going slightly up. But you don't need to worry about that. You just need to know that this is a normal map. Yeah, and you can see if I rotate my light, it should affect the way, well, let's make this a little darker, a little more powerful. That doesn't look very good. You usually want this to be around 1 normally. But if I rotate, you can see that the light is kind of affecting all these surface details. Anyway, that's everything that you need to know to start these tutorials, I think. Please let me know if you have any other questions. All right, see you on Wednesday.